Undercover boss orders breakfast in a neighborhood brunch spot, stops cold when manager says we're all replaceable. You work from morning to noon like this every day. Isn't it exhausting? It's more exhausting not having a job. Around here, everyone's replaceable. The morning shift manager's voice cut through clear and emotionless, as if that statement was just part of the job description. Michael Foster froze. The fork in his hand stopped midair, a half-eaten piece of waffle waiting to be lifted to his mouth. But now, no one at that table was thinking about food anymore. The brunch cafe in this quiet suburb carried on like any other morning.
Sunlight filtered through thick window panes, spilling across light oak tables.
The scent of freshly brewed coffee and browned butter floated through the air. Jazz music whispered from the wall-mounted speaker, intertwining with the soft chatter of young couples, families with toddlers, and freelancers hunched over laptops. Everything felt peaceful, except for one man who began to feel the peace unravel. Michael, 50 years old, was just another quiet customer in a beige canvas jacket, subtle checkered shirt, no tie, no branding. No one recognized him as the founder of the New Dawn Cafe chain, a brand newly franchised in this very brunch space, once handpicked by Michael as the ideal model for a warm atmosphere where every employee is the soul of the place. But the manager's words, Bryce's words, just hollowed that definition of soul completely. Michael glanced toward the counter. Camila, late 20s, was pouring coffee for a party of 4. She still smiled, still nodded politely when a customer asked for more syrup. But Michael noticed it, the slight slowness in her step, her left hand briefly pressing on her lower back to soothe some lingering ache. And when she turned away, her eyes lost the calm they once carried. Michael lowered his eyes, pretending to scroll his phone, but his ears remained on high alert. Bryce, without lifting his head, rattled off the afternoon schedule. Camila, stay until 3. We've got a big party booked. Don't let them complain. And remember, don't pocket the tips. Leave them in the tray. I'll handle it. Camila pressed her lips together, just for a beat, then continued her work as if nothing had happened. But Michael noticed something different now. The way she tucked her pay envelope into her apron pocket. How she asked for a break to make a call. The way she looked at Bryce when he cut her off mid-sentence. No pushback. Only quiet submission. An elderly woman seated near Michael leaned in and whispered she used to be an art teacher. The school shut down. Now she's juggling 3 jobs just to cover rent. Michael said nothing, but his fingers tightened slightly around the coffee cup. The steam no longer warmed the chill building in his chest. This wasn't just a pleasant morning with good food and a friendly server. It was a morning where one sentence laid bare an entire culture. Everyone's replaceable. That phrase, casual as it sounded, was the most dangerous signal in any organization built on trust and people. Where staff are seen as numbers, no matter how good the food is, the meal remains cold. Michael hadn't come here to enjoy breakfast. He came to listen. And now he had heard enough. From the outside, Maple and Rise looked like any Instagram-worthy brunch spot, bougainvillea vines curling around its wooden signage, a handmade New Dawn Cafe logo etched in the corner, and a woven rattan chair at the door for customers to snap photos while waiting. Inside, warm light spilled over vintage tiles. Dark walnut tables. Canvas upholstered chairs.
Small glass jars of baby's breath sat in the center of each table.
The air was filled with buttered pastries, fresh espresso, and mellow indie music. It was a Saturday morning that felt picture perfect. No one noticed the man seated near the wall by the open kitchen. Michael Foster, 50. Cotton shirt with soft stripes, sleeves neatly rolled. Round glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He looked like just another traveling businessman squeezing in breakfast between meetings. But in truth, he was inspecting the 64th franchise location of New Dawn, a cafe brand he'd spent half his life building. He never expected that this place, hailed as the model for community-friendly hospitality, would be where someone casually said everyone's replaceable. And from that very moment, Michael was no longer here just for breakfast. His eyes turned to the service counter where a young woman was bending down to lift a tray of hot pancakes from the kitchen line. Her name was Ellie, around 26 years old, petite, her hair tied in a neat bun, her face kind but carrying the look of someone who hadn't slept enough in weeks. She had shown up at 6 a.m. and hadn't stopped moving for the past 3 hours. Something wasn't right. She smiled at every table. She thanked customers politely. She moved between tables at a near-invisible speed. But Michael noticed every time she had a free second, she would stand in front of the POS system, one hand bracing the counter, eyes fixed on the shift schedule, as if trying to do the math between her work hours and the cost of simply surviving. Around 8:45 a.m., Ellie brought coffee to a couple seated by the window, then quickly returned to the receipt drawer. There, she pulled a small stack of cash from her apron pocket, all tips, and quietly began counting in a corner behind the lemonade tub. Just as she finished, a shadow loomed. Rick, the morning shift manager, in his 40s buzz-cut hair, white dress shirt with the cuffs rolled up, and a voice that always sounded like a command. Rick never had to yell to assert power. His presence alone made staff shrink back. Ellie, table 6. Move. She jumped.
Stuffed the bills back into her shirt pocket.
No argument. No hesitation. Michael watched from his table, eyes narrowing. Ellie's reaction wasn't that of someone putting away money out in the open. It was the instinct of someone who knew she might be seen as doing something wrong. A few minutes later, a middle-aged customer tried slipping a $5 bill into Ellie's hand as she served pancakes. Keep it, sweetie. You've been wonderful. Ellie froze, ready to decline, when Rick suddenly appeared behind her, intercepting. Thank you, sir. Please leave your tips in the tray at the counter. They're distributed weekly to the team. Every word sounded overly crisp, like it had been rehearsed. Michael placed his coffee cup down. The line sounded all too familiar and painfully hollow. The more he observed, the more he realized this calf ran smoothly, but not warmly. Ellie, polite, dedicated, showed no sign of being treated with respect. Rick, appearing right on cue to block any natural interaction between guests and staff, seemed to control not only the tips, but the very existence of his employees. Michael didn't need all the answers right now, but he had more than enough reasons to stay after breakfast. He pressed a button on his phone, ending a fake call. It was a subtle signal to the surveillance team parked in a car outside. He was just about to rise from his corner seat and walk around the caf when a voice behind him made him freeze mid-step. I'm skipping breakfasts. Gotta save gas money until Friday. It was Ellie's voice.
So soft you had to listen hard to catch it.
But the weight of those words hit Michael like someone dropping a stone into his chest. He sat back down, tried to maintain a calm posture, but inside, a crack had begun to spread. The fresh coffee he just ordered arrived. Steam curled upward, catching the midday light blurring behind his lenses. But in his mind, the clearest image wasn't the calf at all. It was Ellie stuffing small bills into her chest pocket. She was hiding something, but not well enough, because Michael had already seen, and he had already heard. Just as Ellie left the order counter to deliver another tray, Rick, her manager, stepped in. He opened the POS drawer, but he didn't check receipts, didn't review orders. He simply scooped up a half-filled tip tray into a small zip pouch, zipped it tight, and slid it into his coat pocket. The entire act took under 10 seconds, but it was long enough for a nearby customer to furrow his brow. Michael didn't miss a thing. He took mental notes with his eyes, just like any CEO who once rose from kitchen prep to boardroom strategy would do instinctively over the years. No quick reactions. Just precise observation of every smallest detail. A young bussing staff, maybe 19 or 20 years old, was cleaning a table near Michael. He picked up a napkin and asked softly, "Could I get another wet towel, son? This place is really clean." "Must get lots of customers." "Huh." The boy gave a half-hearted smile, handed him the towel, and muttered it used to be busy. "Now it's mostly regulars we're just trying to keep." Michael tilted his head gently, prompting further, "Your team here works fast. Looks like the place is still doing okay." "No." The kid glanced toward Rick, then lowered his voice. Miss Ellie once asked to work night shifts so she could combine hours and afford a room nearby. But Rick said he didn't want weak women after 8 p.m. Michael let out a quiet sigh, but his hand trembled slightly as he lifted the coffee cup again. The bitterness was the same, but the feeling inside him had shifted completely since morning. Just then, a bartender near the bar caught Michael's eye. A discreet signal. Michael stood pretending to head to the restroom, but stopped at a dark corner where the bartender was wiping down the counter. "You're asking about tips," right? His voice rough and quick here. Anyone who speaks up doesn't last long. Every time someone asks about bonuses or tips, Rick switches their shift, cuts their hours, or makes up some excuse about poor performance. Everyone knows, but no one dares speak. "I shouldn't be standing here long either," Michael nodded, then silently returned to his table. That entire noon, Michael couldn't eat another bite. Every time Ellie passed, he tried to read her face, but there was nothing except a professional smile. Every time Rick approached, the atmosphere at the nearby table dipped. And each time, a guest pulled out their wallet to tip directly. Rick stepped in with his usual broadcast voice. "Tips go into the central tray. We distribute them fairly." Fairly, Michael questioned internally. A system he had built on respect, now operating under fear and aid. Ellie came back one last time to check if Michael needed anything else. He looked her straight in the eyes, not as a customer, but as a person trying to understand another human being. "You doing okay?" Ellie hesitated for a beat, then forced a weak smile. "I'm used to it. Around here, everyone's replaceable." That sentence, echoing Rick's exact words from the morning, hit Michael straight in the heart. No, Michael thought. No one is born to be replaceable. And certainly not those struggling to survive each day inside a system he once believed was something to be proud of. Michael didn't ask more. He let his eyes do the listening. And his voice, soft, curious, kind, remained that of a customer. "The waitress earlier, her name's Ellie, right? She's really efficient. I'd like to tip her a bit extra. How do you guys split tips?" Here, it was a seemingly casual question, but it made the busser wiping the counter freeze for a breath. His eyes scanned the room, then he lowered his voice. "We don't keep the tips, sir. Rick holds everything. He says it'll be distributed at the end of the month, but it's been 3 months. We haven't seen a thing." Michael nodded, not showing surprise, but inside the pieces were clicking into place. He softened his tone as if he were just genuinely curious. What if a guest wants to give a tip directly? The kid glanced toward Rick, standing across the room, then whispered, "We're not allowed to, sir." One girl was called into a private meeting just for accepting a $5 bill directly from a regular. Rick said it violated the tip pooling policy. But the thing is, none of us have ever seen what pooling really means. By the end of the morning, the place began to quiet down. Ellie had just brought out pancakes for an elderly couple Sunday morning regulars. She smiled and bowed her head politely. A flawless smile. So polished that anyone looking from the outside might believe she was fine. But just a few minutes later, when the wooden door closed behind the last pair of customers, Ellie finally exhaled. No one noticed except Michael. She turned toward the back where the employee break corner had an old leather chair beside a hot water dispenser. In her hand was a small envelope. Michael quietly stepped toward the glass-paneled room overlooking the break corner, making no sound. From behind the semi-transparent door, he saw Ellie sit down. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope and pulled out the printed payslip. No sound came from her, but her eyes said everything. $168.43, that was all after deductions for nearly 40 hours of weekly work. Not counting overtime, not counting tips she should have earned. Ellie didn't cry. She only bowed her head, shoulders lightly shaking, then curled into herself, arms wrapped around her bag as if holding on to something greater than exhaustion, dignity. Michael looked at her as if seeing his own mother again years ago. A woman who used to walk for hours to get to the bakery where she worked, also never paid enough but always smiling because of the children waiting at home. He clenched his fist. Everything he had built, New Dawn's brand, His promise of fairness, a culture of respect, had it all just been a pretty ideal on paper, just as he turned to leave another server, Maya, around 30, entered the break corner. She paused briefly when she saw Ellie like that, but didn't ask anything. She simply poured a glass of water, placed it gently next to her friend, then walked over to the poorly taped-up schedule sheet on the wall. Ellie's name wasn't there. No one's was except Rick's. Michael stored everything in his mind. His face remained calm, but each step, each emotion was pushing him closer to the edge. He returned to his table and retrieved the old notebook from his inner jacket pocket, a habit from his early days as a regional manager. He scribbled a few lines, his eyes still fixed on that corner of the cafe. At the top of the page, he underlined one sentence 3 times: the system isn't broken. The people running it are distorting it. And at the bottom, he added a small note, his handwriting slightly trembling with emotion: no one can do right if a whole month's wage isn't enough to live on. Michael stood up. Not hurried, not loud. He didn't need a name tag or a title to give weight to what was coming next. He walked slowly toward the bar where Rick was standing, tapping on the POS screen like nothing had happened. Michael didn't say much. He simply placed a hand on the glossy wood of the counter right in front of Rick. A simple gesture, but in that moment, it echoed like a knock at the gate of truth. "Excuse me," he began, voice calm, barely louder than the soft jazz music drifting from the ceiling speakers. "I have a few questions." Rick looked up, still wearing his rehearsed smile. "Yes, sir. What can I get you? Coffee refill?" Michael shook his head gently. "No." "About tips. About the shift schedule. And about how you define the word placeable." The atmosphere shifted. Clearly, a bussing staff had just placed a tray down, but his hands were no longer brisk. A barista behind the espresso machine paused mid-tap. Ellie, from across the room, looked up, her gaze landing right as Michael stared straight at Rick. She didn't know why her chest tightened. Only that something was about to happen. Rick smiled again, this time more forced than the first. "Oh, maybe just a little misunderstanding between shifts, sir. The caf was a bit busy today." "They're all just a little swamped," Michael didn't reply. He simply adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose, a small gesture, but one that made his face clearer. Not the face of a passing guest, but the gaze of someone who had seen and understood more than hollow excuses. "Can you show me the tip distribution chart? I've heard some conflicting things from the staff. And I think in your role as manager, you must have a way to prove what you're saying is true." Rick frowned slightly. There was no file prepared, no chart posted in the break room. Everything was always compiled later or sent to the main office. But Michael, founder of New Dawn CAF, was the one who wrote that policy. He knew full well every location must post daily shift by shift tip breakdowns clearly in the employee area. The absence of public posting meant one thing: something was being deliberately hidden. Rick fumbled. "I don't have a hard copy with me right now, but I can email it later." Michael crossed his arms in silence. His gaze was no longer sharp, it had shifted into something else: disappointment. Just then, Maya, the soft-spoken cleaning girl, stepped forward, placing a worn notebook on the counter. "I've been recording my shift's tip amounts daily," she said quietly, "because no one ever announces it. So we had to write it down ourselves." Rick turned to Maya, tone tight. "Maya, this is internal business. You're not allowed." Michael raised a hand, gently signaling him to stop. His eyes reassured Maya and warned Rick. "Thank you," Michael said, then flipped through a few pages. The numbers were inconsistent, illogical, opaque. "You said everything is split evenly," Michael stated. "But why does Ellie's recorded share not even equal half that of another shift, even though she's been on since 6 a.m. until past lunch?" Rick said nothing. Michael placed the notebook down on the counter, then looked around, his eyes scanning every staff member, every corner of the CAF. No one spoke, but everyone knew this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. Ellie stood just a few steps away, her hands clasped tightly over her apron. She didn't know whether to worry or to hope. He turned to Ellie. "Do you have 5 minutes?" She nodded softly, then followed him out to the back patio. The glass door closed behind them, but the CAF cameras were still recording. Everything was being captured. And beyond that still frame was the beginning of an expose no one at Maple and Rise ever saw coming. Michael stepped back in from the rear patio where he had just had a private word with Ellie. No one knew what was said, but the look in her eyes when she returned to the counter had changed a mix of disbelief and hope, as if someone had just opened a door she thought would stay forever locked. As for Michael, he remained composed, walking straight to the center of the CAF floor. He stopped at the front counter, took off his round glasses and placed them gently on the wood. The room froze. Not because of the gesture, but because of the words that followed, spoken softly yet cracking open like thunder in the hearts of those who knew the truth. I am Michael Foster. A breath held tight. A staff member dropped a stainless steel spoon. The metallic clang rang out long and sharp. Founder of the New Dawn calf chain. Rick stood frozen. His eyes darted rapidly between Michael, Ellie, the rest of the staff, as if searching for an escape in a room with none left. Ellie's hand trembled, but for the first time, she didn't look down. She looked directly at the man who had just revealed his identity, as if finally someone had heard her voice after so many silent days. Michael took one slow step forward, stopping right in front of Rick. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply quoted word for word from the internal company policy tips: must not be pooled, must not be held overnight, and must absolutely not be distributed without transparent reporting by shift. He lifted his gaze to Rick. You violated all three. Do you have anything to say? Rick swallowed hard.
Sweat glistened on his forehead.
I've just been doing it the way it's always been done. This branch hasn't been updated with the new system yet. Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned to a man standing quietly near the entrance, someone few had noticed until now, the regional manager. Wearing a gray shirt, holding a large tablet, he nodded and powered on the device. The screen displayed video segments pulled from Maple and Reese's internal cameras over the past 6 weeks. In the footage, Rick collecting tips after each shift, stashing them into his private drawer. No breakdown charts, no verification, no witnesses. A waitress gasped, "Oh, nah!" Barista stared at the screen, watching herself dropping tips into the tray, now finally understanding why her payout was always short. Rick took half a step back, his lips moving, but no sound came out. Michael's gaze stayed steady, but his next words sent a wave through the room. I didn't come here to hear excuses. I came to correct what's been wrong under the very name I've entrusted with my values. Michael nodded to the regional manager, who pulled out his phone and quickly contacted HR. Rick, realizing what was coming, lowered his head, no longer able to speak. Michael turned to the staff. His tone now gentler, more human. We're going to make changes. Not because I showed up, but because you've deserved this all along. Another pause. Then applause. It started from the bar. One person. Then 2, 3. Then the entire CAF. Not because they were witnessing a CEO, but because for the first time, they were witnessing justice called by its true name. The CAF at Maple and Rise fell into a quiet stillness. No more clinking cutlery. No quiet morning conversations over coffee. Every eye, from customer to employee, was fixed on the man who had just dismantled a system no one thought could be touched. Michael Foster stood at the center, not as a boss, but as a man taking responsibility for the name he had placed on every door: New Dawn. He stepped closer to Ellie. His voice was steady, just loud enough. I'm announcing an official change effective starting with the very next shift. A waitress quietly wiped tears from her face. She didn't dare blink, afraid she might miss something. Michael continued, starting today, all tips at this location will be processed through an automated system. The real-time tip-sharing app will be activated on the POS system and mobile devices. Everyone will see exactly what they deserve. No one will have to take someone else's word for it ever again. Some staff turned to each other, eyes wide with disbelief. Rick, now asked to stand aside, had nothing left to say. Michael turned to the regional manager. The system will be updated within 24 hours. And the full tip data from the last 2 months will be retrieved. Any violations must be addressed per policy. Then he pulled out a white envelope from his folder and handed it carefully to Ellie. "This is your official full-time contract." And he paused for half a second as if to make sure everyone was truly listening. "A 3-month travel support card. You won't have to count every gallon of gas anymore." Ellie stood still. Her hands gripped the envelope so tightly the paper crinkled slightly. I've never had anyone treat me like this," her voice choked up. Michael gave a soft nod, then spoke slowly, each word etched into the air. "Because you are not replaceable. Because kindness cannot be replaced." No one moved. An elderly customer dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. A barista behind the counter turned away, eyes misted red. Rick was officially suspended on the spot in front of the entire staff and all customers. The full team had their rights restored and missing tips from previous shifts were traced and repaid. A new LED board was installed at the entrance. REALTIMETIPSYSETEMNOSHADOWSHARING. Ellie signed her full-time contract and received a bonus adjusted to the local cost of living. Everything, every injustice, every unheard word was now made right. No vague promises. No drawn-out speeches. Just concrete actions delivered at the exact moment they were needed most. From Michael's first glance, just a curious customer, to the subtle touch on the counter, to the moment he removed his glasses and revealed his name, and now his silhouette fading into the morning light, vanishing behind the Brunch cafe's tall glass doors. A morning like any other. But for the people here, it was the day everything began anew. Who was really taking the money? Was Ellie saved? Would the CEO change anything? Stay till the end? He doesn't just expose the lie, he replaces it with justice? The kind-hearted are no longer forgotten. The shady system was dismantled right at its peak. Viewers witnessed justice served instantly, precisely when hope needed to be restored.